I want to introduce myself again. It's Hans Doderer. I am a science teacher at Paintsville Independent. I teach 7th through 12th grade. This year I have 9th grade in the senior ecology classes. We've been doing this trout in the classroom project at Paintsville High School for this makes their 4th year. We have raised all 3 trout species from the eye to egg stage to the fingerling stage and have released them in Kentucky wildlife management areas the last 3 years. This year we wanted to put a spin on it because we couldn't really raise a different trout. We've raised all 3. And the first 3 years we wanted to see the differences in raising different species, how it might, how the difference might be. We learned a lot about the kids that are in the class, learned a lot about water quality, and I focus on the biogeochemical cycles and mainly nitrogen cycle because that's an area that our kids are weak with, understanding that cycle. And it gives our kids also, with the equipment that we use, a lot of skills using water quality analysis and the types of laboratory tests that you use to conduct water quality test. And so our kids get a lot of experience using lab techniques. And this year doing a lot more with research, actual research and more depth, because we wanted to, like I said, put a spin on it. So there's this invasive species of aquatic plant that lives in the Paintsville Lake and many other lakes in Kentucky, and it's called hydrilla. And so it's invasive, and we kind of want to get it out of the waters, but I was thinking, what if we took this invasive species that's a plant that we really want to try to get rid of on one hand and see if it had a use in another. So this year's design is the students are going to separate the 120-gallon cold water tank that we have into 2 separate units equal in size, and everything's going to be kept constant. I believe they're still designing this experiment as we speak, and we're supposed to pick up the eggs in a couple, 3 weeks, 2-3 weeks from now. But they're thinking and researching on how to design an experiment that would keep everything constant except for the fact that part of the tank is going to get some of this plant placed into it, the hydrilla. And the problem in practice was that over the past 3 years, we found that once you release the sac fry, they will sink to the bottom of the tank. So once they hatch, you release them out of the baskets into the bottom of the tank. And they stay there until they utilize all the nutrients in their sacs, their yolk sacs. And they're supposed to swim back up, become swim-up fry. This usually takes anywhere from 8 to 10 days, depending on the species. But what happens is sometimes the swim-up fry, they don't swim up. They stay at the bottom, kind of get lazy, and some of them will even stay at the bottom until they die. So you lose a lot of fish that way, and so the survival rates were some of the things that we want to see. Can we do anything to improve the survival rates of these fish to get them swim up faster so they don't starve to death? And so the idea is putting a plant in there to see, would the plant cause them in any way possibly to want to swim up faster? Would there be any benefits of this plant that has no really use, a lot of use in our waters, except a lot of the fish and wildlife people would like to get rid of this plant, So the thing is, we want our students to see if they can design an experiment and then turn it into an animal behavior thing. What is the behavior of this sac fry? How does it interact with this hydrilla? Well, you see a difference between the side of the tank that does not have the hydrilla placed in it versus the side that does. And if you could, if there was, if it so happens to be that there is a positive advantage of having the plant in there, could we not then use this in a larger scale possibly to, as a model, you might say, for those that raise trout to increase their productivity, and that would be an economic advantage if you could get more fish to live that way. One of the advantages for the students, though, is to learn the geochemical cycles that I talked about, especially the nitrogen cycle. They learn a lot about the importance of water quality, so we have guests come in and speak about water quality issues in Kentucky and that kind of thing, and then the kids present. They'll have to cover a water pollutant, and they'll get up and present their findings to their classmates. So it's an ongoing project, and it's this year's twist. I think it's going to be a little interesting to see what happens. Regardless of what happens, we do plan on releasing the fish, and Paintsville Lake, we have a wildlife management area there called the Little Paint Creek, so that's where they'll go. Our kids are taking a field trip to see the only cold water facility in Kentucky. It's called Wolf Creek National Fish Hatchery. And Sheila Kirk's been wonderful down there, the lady that runs that place where she provides the eggs. You have to get permits. I found that out the first year after we let some go illegally. But you have to get permits to raise them, and you have to get permits to let them go. It's a great thing. You can research on the internet and find a lot. States like Virginia especially does a lot with their schools with trout in the classroom. It's a very good way for the kids to see, though, that it's hard to model Mother Nature. It is hard to keep homeostasis in an enclosed system. And so they see how easy it is for things to go wrong and things to get out of balance. And so it's really a challenge for them to keep this 120-gallon tank, especially after the fish hatch, because they release a lot of waste products into the water. How do you keep that stabilized? And then that's where the bacteria, the useful bacteria, come into play in your biological filters and the nitrogen cycle. So that really plays a good part into it. One thing this project does well, I do think, though, is the laboratory experiences it gives kids. Our kids will do a series of tests. One's dissolved oxygen. They use Lamont kits for this. It's good enough for government work. It's a titration type of it's a chemical analysis of the water. And then they do the pH, measurement of pH. They do conductivity. They do nitrite, nitrate, and ammonia levels. So they learn a lot about water. And I think Kentucky, if you go back and look not long ago, we have one of the top 5 or 6 surface water, the most surface water. We're like the 5th or 6th in the world for surface water. But not long ago, reports came out that 7 out of 10 of our waterways, streams, creeks, and rivers, we're not really worthy of recreating in. And I think that's sad that we have such a beautiful state. And we should be proud of going down and kayaking down our rivers and creeks and streams. And sometimes I'm not so proud when I get in the water and go just a little piece down the river or creek. I get kind of disappointed. So I thought maybe I could instill this with my students, that they might take more of appreciation for the environment and ultimately be better stewards of their environment. And that's where this goes for me. If I can ask one question, I looked at this and I thought, well, I need to answer these questions myself. One question I would like to ask the state of Kentucky, and I kind of know the answer to this, but I want to ask my students if they know what kind of questions they'd come up with. But one question about this project that you'd want to know, what kind of question you'd want to ask, that is, why doesn't the National Fish Hatchery in Jamestown, Kentucky, place aquatic plants in their facilities, in their runways in which they raise these fish? Now, they raise all the trout for the whole state of Kentucky. And there's got to be reasons why, they don't put aquatic life in their runways. It could be lots of different reasons, actually. So that was the question I'd ask. It's a great project. I would encourage anyone that wants to get into this to go for it. It's a fun project. It's not easy. Sometimes you have some difficulties, and sometimes you can even lose fish. We were really fortunate, though. I think we're only a school in Kentucky that's raised all 3 species with success, where there are survival rates that we could release the fish. But in a nutshell, that's the project this year, is to add the invasive species there, the hydrilla, to one side of the tank to see if it would encourage or have any effect on the swim-up behavior of the rainbow trout sack fry. Any questions? Great. Thank you, guys.